Hello, lovely people. And I have another fantastic guest on today. This is a man that I came across in 2020. I've spoken before about how my friend Suzanne Jane Taylor introduced me to Soma Breath. And I did a retreat in one of those lockdown things. And this guy was on the retreat and he just made me laugh. And I've got a smile on my face now because we've just said hello for 5 minutes before we started recording, and he just makes me laugh. And what I loved about Greg Mannion is that he takes all the kind of woo-woo shit out of meditation. You know, a lot of it is kind of very serious and very straight. And Greg just goes for it. He just goes for it the whole time. And he has completely transformed my life. And now I say this about a lot of my guests, but he has. And so I'm going to tell you why. After that retreat, I signed up with Soma, and I'm now a Soma breathwork coach. But I also signed up for Greg Mannion's course with Infinite Breath to learn how to write meditations. And, you know, lots of courses, things teach you to do breathwork. And, you know, all the benefits of breath work, the science behind it, which is just extraordinary. But very few of those courses teach you to actually write them, but not just write a meditation, but how to deal with people, really. I think that's a fair, and how to deal with film. And I'm before I bring you on, I don't know if you remember this, Greg, but one of the first exercises we had on that course was to film ourselves and put it in the group. And I couldn't do it. I think I was about a month after everybody else because I didn't have the courage to do it. But times have changed, and I want to bring on the fantastic Mr. Greg Mannion.
I will applaud myself because that's what I get people to do in the sessions. Nice one. Hello. What an introduction. I like it. And yeah, going back to the beginning with you, there was shyness there, but also not shyness, because when you start talking, you can really go for it. But there was a little bit of shyness. But you definitely came out of your skin when you were writing and performing those meditations. Changed a lot, man. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
Well, we'll talk about the course later on in the episode, but just a massive thank you, mate. And because of Greg, I've got my album out, The Wellness Awakening, which again, I'm going to talk about later. But first of all, let's get to know Greg Mannion.
Okay. So what would you like to know? Where would you like me to start?
Well, I'd like you to start with your story. What took you on this journey into, you know, I mean, it's a lot more than breath work, but, you know, you had quite a bit of shit in your life, didn't you? You had quite a traumatic childhood. I don't think that's a understatement. You can talk about that or not. That's your choice. Okay. But it led you on a path to alcoholism.
Okay, well, yeah, let's go right to the shit. I love it, the shit. Okay, but yeah, so well, I was born in just outside Liverpool. I was actually born on the coast in a place called Formby. And when I was 8, we moved into Liverpool. My dad was from Manchester, mum from Liverpool. So I had a mixture. We moved into the city, rather. I had a mixture of the countryside when I was a kid, which I really loved. It was a great place to grow up as a kid. And then the Liverpool culture and lifestyle, which I really love and loved as to grow up in, up until I started traveling. I've always been like moving around the world quite a lot since I was about 20. But yeah, when I was young, when I was 9, my mum died, and I'm one of 3. I'm the youngest. And obviously I didn't know then, but it still does affect me slightly, but you know, not like every day or not much, to be honest. But if we're talking about our story, it's an important part. And whether that has led me towards alcoholism or not, I don't know. And just to point out, it's about 9.5 years now being sober. You could say I'm an alcoholic. You could say I'm a recovered alcoholic, because I've done the steps. I feel like I'm not going to drink, but I call it the 1% rule, which is like I genuinely have no desire, and I don't mind being around drinkers. I'm out and about all the time. I enjoy it.
Congratulations. First of all, massive congratulations on that, Greg.
Thanks. Yeah, it's weird because after a while, it's not necessarily a time thing, because a lot of people in AA, and I still go because I respect what it is, and it's been an amazing foundation for me. It's more like a thinking thing as well. I mean, we can trap ourselves quite a lot. We've got repetitive thoughts and patterns and resentments and things. So I go in there, and number one that I got quite early in AA is the opposite of addiction is connection. And if you're addicted to any substance to a high level, like I was, you're probably going to be alone at the end of it, whether that's a couple of weeks or a couple of years. The last couple of years of drinking were extremely severe. I live in Spain, Barcelona. That's where I was living at the time. So having the connection in AA is a beautiful thing. It's a funny little place, and a lot of people don't get it, and I understand that. And I don't believe in God because it isn't about God. People sometimes misunderstand that, but it helps you get out of your head to have some kind of higher power, something to think those things away. But anyway, time-wise, it's not the most important thing, but I'm sober. I feel pretty good about that. I don't want to drink. Go back. So basically, I traveled a little bit. I went to Australia, Bali. I lived in Amsterdam. I lived in Italy. I lived in Spain in my 20s. And then I was in Brighton in my late 20s. I met a girlfriend at the time, and we lived together. And then she moved back to Barcelona. And then when she left, I was like, oh, what's happened? What have I done? Kind of my fault. And a month later, being very impulsive, I was in Barcelona with the cat, with everything I owned in a car, just drove there. And I was supposed to stay in my friend's place because I've been there before for about a month. Well, I looked for a place. Fast forward 8 years later, and a hell of a lot of drinking and good times. I'm not against drinking and going out and, really good times, but also someone described it well. I think it was Anthony Hopkins, where he says, it gives you energy. You can do things. If I wasn't drinking at 18 and all of a sudden I was off it. No, it was probably late 20s, early 30s. It was becoming a problem. It's the scorpion's tail. So you're enjoying it. You feel great. But then all of a sudden the tail will come round and sting you right in the ass before you know it, for whatever reason. And it's never usually one reason. Now I've looked into addiction more. We're always avoiding emotions or avoiding certain feelings, avoiding traumas and stuff. Whatever it is, you get to a point, if you are an alcoholic or addicted to certain substances, there's some kind of emotional trauma and traumas, and it's a bit of a heavy word, but can be small things as well that you're covering.
But it is, yeah.
But then eventually it turns into this like huge thing that's right on your back, and I couldn't escape, or rather I thought I couldn't escape. In the mid-30s in Barcelona, in the mid-30s, not in 1930s, in my 30s,
You're not that old, love.
I know. Thank God. It became a real problem, and I could kind of get away with it in Barcelona as well. It was a bit cheaper. I was doing bits of work. I was stayed in this place for 8 years, and it was fine. But it was one of the reason I say that is because I should have arrived and kept moving on, but I didn't. I got kind of stuck, if you like. The last few years were genuinely depressing and awful. There's many sides to the story within that. But luckily, it's like when you're in the middle of that and you think that you can't escape, or rather you need that substance. You need it. So every morning I would get up with a shaking hangover, and before people could see me, I'd go around the corner. I'd be drinking 2 big bottles of beer under a tree while pretending to look at my phone or something.
Oh my God.
Just before able to be stopped shaking and going back. And people say, God, Greg, you don't seem to have a hangover, because they didn't know I'd be having beers all the way through the day. Luckily, beer was my thing, so it wasn't too much spirits, which would just make me go pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I would coast like this for a long time, but without realizing there was severe depression there and emotions and things which I wasn't dealing with. I always liked, or I thought I liked, to go down that road and talk about these things. But if you're in a state where you're filling your body with a certain substance, whatever it may be, to a high degree all the time, again, I'm not against bits of these things, it takes over your life and you don't even realize it. So it took me, let's say, a year or two of people really saying, maybe you should break, maybe you should stop. And eventually I met someone, funnily enough, on a beer crawl. We were taking people out around the pub. It took that long. I know, the last year of drinking. And I met him, and he wasn't drinking, but he was there to go to AA, and his dad, who had been in AA as well. So he introduced me to it. We continued drinking for that year, me and this friend of mine who's a bit younger. At this point, I was about 36 years old, and no, I was 36. And that last year was just a reminder. I was working on the beach, doing pointless jobs. I mean, I'd been a street performer as well in Barcelona, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but I did it for 3 years. It was totally stupid to do it that long, because I I was supplying my drinking habit. I was just doing stupid things on the street, which were reasonably entertaining, but underneath, now I can say it and look back. It was really soul destroying what I was doing, with little bits of moments in between, which were good, and enough money to buy beer, pay the rent, all those things. And then that didn't happen anymore, thank God. And I went and met this friend of mine. So we started to look at AA. The first meeting, I wasn't drunk, but I'd had a few beers, and that's okay in AA. People don't seem to realize that. You're not necessarily supposed to speak when you're drunk, but you can go and you can check it out. And I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as weird as I might have thought or been told. I did not know what was going to happen or what I would do, but you have to break down your ego. You have to be vulnerable, and you have to admit that your life had become unmanageable. Now, that's the first step, but these things are things that I think of. The ego needs to drop, and you need to be vulnerable. If you're an addict and you're in the mode of still addictive substances, it's hard to do that because the ego takes over. You got resentment, it's everyone else's fault, or you got loads of self-pity and you're just off crying sometimes. It's fucking awful, basically. But it took me a year more or less of going in and going out and trying to get the message to eventually asking for help, which means getting a sponsor. And I was lucky I'd been there for a while, because I got to know quite a few people in there, and I got an Irish guy who is now a friend of mine to be my sponsor, and asking for help. So many people don't do that, and it's still not something I do every day now, but I'm 10 times better. And that's really all it was. That was one of the life-changing moments. And I remember sending the message because my friend kept telling me, just do the steps. And it's what I say to other people now, and I get frustrated. But it's up to them. It's their choice. I'm like, just do the steps. I'm like, don't need it. No, I'm just having one beer. It's fine. If you're an alcoholic, you go like this, and then you'll be off before you know it. Could take a day, could take a few weeks. Anyway, I eventually did that, sent a message, met him that night. And since that day, I've never drank since, because I realized that a disease, there's different ways of looking at it, but it's also mental and physical. I thought it was just physical, but it wasn't. And again, AA is not for everyone, and I don't agree with everything in there at all. And there's different personalities completely, but I like that. It helps my ego to not necessarily agree with everything and not agree with everyone, but that's one of the principles of it. And having that connection, having a door that is fucking open. People don't realize, even if you go drinking again, you can go back in. It's not a problem. People wanting to help, or at least listen to you. When you go to a meeting, we're sitting here now and it's great. You're listening to me and I'm going to listen to you. But in normal life, we all do it. We're interrupting each other. It's just, oh, I want to do this. Yeah, what do you think about that? I agree. I disagree. Let's have an argument. Let's all agree, whatever. You've got a few minutes or longer where you're speaking or crying or whatever, and everyone just shuts up and listens. It's unique. And me too. When other people share, in fact, I probably get most out of it when I'm listening to other people as well, because that's what I brought into some of the workshops I did with the breath work and things, when I do little sharing circles, and same online that we did at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to explain their emotions and things like this. I try it a little bit without pushing too much. But what would happen was someone in those rooms would say something that I desperately wanted to say, but especially at the beginning, even now, but not so much, I would want to express, or, it's not important, or they're not going to agree with me, or blah, blah, blah. And someone would say it, and you're like, oh, it takes a shitload off your shoulders, and someone else might feel the same or similar. Doesn't matter what it is, any other drug, addiction, or just life in general. And you could express and you could listen. And that was a game changer. And luckily in Barcelona, there's a very wide mix of people. So it's not a small meeting in a small town with the same 5 people. That could genuinely drive you insane, and it does drive some people insane.
Yeah.
But people going through all the time. So from that day on, I haven't drank, and it's been amazing. Which then, let's fast forward again to a few years after that.
I'm just going to come back to AA for a second there, because I've done one AA meeting. So I don't know if you remember that after my spinal fusion went wrong, I spent 2 years of my life in bed addicted to opioids and alcohol, and my drinking got out of control. And because of all the shit that was going on in my life, my mum, my sister, my 2 best friends dying, and my marriage was falling to pieces, and there was just so much shit going on, and I was drinking more and more and more. And then about my friend on Tinder who I fell for, and then I thought he ghosted me, and he actually died that night in his sleep. And after Paolo died, I drank for England. So I found out on New Year's Eve 2019, and I spent the first 3 months of 2020 completely off my fucking head and face. I was so drunk. and eventually my children said to me, you need to go to AA. And I went along, and I was very nervous. And I went along to the Priory in West London just because it happened to be the nearest one next to me. And it was like watching blooming Saturday night TV in there, all the celebrities. I just go, oh my God, what the fuck? But it was a fantastic experience. I was quite surprised how God-centered it was. I didn't realize there was quite so much on God. And I don't, you said you don't believe in God, and I'm going to ask you about that later, and what you do believe in. But for me, it's the universe, and I was just quite surprised. And it was also amazing how supportive everybody was. And I remember getting up and telling my story and just weeping like a banshee. You know, just I couldn't stop the crying, and it was such an emotional release. And then 2 days later we went into a fucking lockdown. I was like, hang on, I've just taken the first step and now you've put me into a fucking lockdown for nearly 2 years.
But it's funny because that's kind of how we met, isn't it? Through Susan and all that.
Yeah, because Suzanne, one of Paolo, hashtag Paolo's women, she made me go. She was just like, you got to go, and I did, and it's been a strange old journey. And I know I should go back there because I still drink, and I still drink more than I'd like to drink. I can go without it now, and I've never drunk during the day, apart from that 3 months in 2020. And then when they put us in a fucking lockdown, me, like most of the rest of the world, barely put a bottle out of their hand for about 6 weeks in bloody shock that I couldn't believe what was happening. It was like, what the fuck? And people are believing this. So I will revisit that. And I would just encourage anybody in the audience today, give it a go.
Give it a go, exactly. Because you mentioned God, and I'm going to go to my belief in God, which is God, which is gift of desperation. We're not talking about the universe yet, but we'll get there. But God, gift of desperation. That's why it's important in AA to find the people that you kind of vibe with, right? Because there is a whole weird mix in there, and everyone's sober, drinking too much coffee, talking about their emotions, and there's some mental problems going around, but we all have them, I believe, in different varying degrees. But God, gift of desperation, if you feel that desperate, something will work in there for you. And it's, again, not just the drinking, it's about the process of doing the steps and thinking. I think everyone would benefit from doing the steps, but no one wants to admit that life is unmanageable and things like that. But the word God is mentioned, right? But it's very important to notice this. In the 30s, there was a thing called the Oxford Group. Now, that was a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous, but it was centered on religion. I don't know if it was Christian or something, but like, you got to believe in this God, and this is this thing. That was Bill Wilson, who his friend told him about this. Bill Wilson was a terrible drunk, that he liked the idea of the group, but he didn't like the idea of the God. So higher power is one of the main things that's mentioned in there, along with God. Believe in your higher power. What is that to you? And the principle is simply to get you out of this. As Tony Robbins says, stay in your head, you're dead. If you just stay in your head and ruminating thoughts and talking to yourself all day, that's why it's good to go to a meeting or connect with friends. Anyone, you've got to get out of your head in some way. Now, that's why I take these little things and I believe in them a bit more. But the word God is mentioned. It's part of the principle, but it's a God of your choosing. And I wish people would get it more, but, sometimes it takes time. It's a God of your choosing, whatever you want. And it's also, remember that the big book, most of it was written in the 30s and 40s. So the language is old and a lot of people don't get it. But again, I'm sitting in the AA convention this weekend I was at down the coast here, and I went to one of the late night meetings, and it was brilliant because I was surrounded by Irish and people from Liverpool. So I was in heaven. These strong, huge fellas talking about what they'd done in the drink, and then quoting lines and paragraphs out the big book, how their mate had helped them, how the big book had helped them, how this guy there, that guy there, which a few years ago would have been in the street beating someone up or being beaten up or whatever. That is a miracle. And a miracle is also just a change in perception. So I also believe that we're often caught ourselves, and I'm getting so much better now, caught in ourselves, in our beliefs. Oh, I believe this, or this is this, and that's that. We've got to be able to change those beliefs over life. Otherwise, we're just going to be like this, in one direction. I mean, I didn't get AA, but eventually I think I did, but in my own way. It's different for everyone. So, and there's quite a lot of people I know that don't quite get it or don't want to go in there and sit in those rooms, I understand it, but I hope they will or do, because like you said, there's a whole variety. There's musicians, there's actors, there's nut jobs, there's people who used to be clergymen or something. The first meetings I was in, there was a guy who was like 18 and a guy who was 81. Someone living on the street, someone running a company. It just doesn't matter. And that's what I liked about it, because that's what I liked as a kid. I don't care whether you call yourself this, that, or the other, or you live on the street, whether you're running a business, you got £1 million. Don't make no difference to me. We're all equal, but different. So that's kind of what I get in there, you know, as long as a bit of madness as well, but the connection.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but if you're enjoying this podcast and you'd like to find out more about my work, please come and join me on my webpage, phillyjlade.com, where I can give you all the up-to-date information of what I'm doing. You will get a free, exclusive walking into your future meditation. I'm a shit hot manifestor, me. You can find out how to buy my book, The Natural Wellness Journal, a layperson's guide to your natural health systems, your very own NHS. We all have them. Let's use them. I look forward to seeing you there and introducing you to my new Rumble channel. Yes, I'm going to Rumble, where we will have freedom of speech and my guests can talk about anything they want to. Thank you. I'll see you there. Because this leads on really nicely from the fact that everybody has a story to tell, and a story that takes them to where they are in their life. And, we've both been very honest about our stories, and a lot of people find it quite hard to talk about their stories, but you did a very beautiful thing. Was it in New York that you did it, where you started it, where you started people's stories?
Yeah, but I won't. It's definitely not me who started it, but I'll give you the little the story there and why I like it. So again, I've always been genuinely interested in other people. I love the connection, the vibe, chatting, joking, and some people don't get me. Sometimes they think I'm being too weird, but I really enjoy.
You weird?
Yeah, I know, who would guess. Conversing with other people in a nice way. You know, if someone's a complete dickhead or you think I'm a dickhead, you go your different ways. But anyway, people in general. And the anonymous side as well. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, even some people don't mention the name, but I think it's more out there now. And you can say 12-step program, whatever you want, but it is what it is. I'm not going to mention the names of people, obviously. But the anonymous side of this stories thing that you mentioned, it wasn't my idea. It was a guy I went to New York for the first time about 5 years ago. And it was a dream come true, man. I loved it. And I was just walking around everywhere with all this energy, seeing all the vibes, seeing all the, because I'm a big film freak. Our family were always into films. So I'm looking at all these places where the film has been made, and I loved it. Genuinely loved it. Dived right in there. Go to a place called Washington Square Park, and it's got a bit of a freaky vibe to it. You know, there's musicians out there, there's people playing stuff, and people doing art and that, and people just hanging around having a cigarette.
And street entertainers like you used to be.
Yes, like me. So that's why that street entertainment I did, I don't feel bad about it. I knew underneath I was killing myself with the drinking, but I still have that kind of street life in me, which I like, man. I like it. And there I could see it, but it wasn't all like street performers. It was really people just doing anything and just hanging around as well, just hanging around. But being New York, it was genuinely nuts. I mean, there's so many situations, but let's go to the Strangers Project. And to give them a bit, the Strangers Project, you can find them on Facebook and Instagram. His idea. So about
we'll put the link in the show notes by Strangers Project.
About 10 years before I met him, he said, he's just a guy, and I got talking to him. Essentially what it is. So you walk into Washington Square Park, and you've got, like, let's say a row of about 20 or 30 pieces of paper, A4, about 4 or 5 deep, sitting there with a few lights and a guy saying, "What's your story?" A big sign saying, "What's your story?" And you walk up and you start reading these handwritten stories that people have written, but with no name. Not like I'm a doctor and nurse, or I live on the street, or I'm a big company. Pardon me. None of that. Just a story. So what happens there straight away when people have the freedom to express, which is another one of mine, the freedom to express, they would write anything and everything. Could be like a girl just drawing a picture saying, "I had a lovely day with my daddy," or someone writing an in-depth story about how they're one of New York City's highest paid hookers and this, that, and the other, and they do this. And then someone else saying, And I remember these ones specifically, how like when I was 15, I got pregnant and everyone told me I didn't want to have it. I wanted to be a nurse. That was my main thing in life, but I couldn't be a nurse. So I had the child. This is all in one little piece of paper.
Wow.
And I this and I did that. And then eventually my daughter is now 15. She's got a life. We're here in Washington Square Park. And 2 days ago, I got my nurse degree and I'm now a nurse. I mean, that's all in one.
Oh my God.
You feel it straight away. What happens is people connect to the emotion. So I was there for hours and being me, and when I'm high or like high on life, I'm chatting away to everyone and what's going on. Met a few people looking at these stories, loved it. So I would go back and help him a little bit. Like he didn't need much, but just hang around. Really enjoyed it. I read many, many stories, but the whole principle, you can share what you want. People connect to the emotion. They do not connect to a fucking badge which you have on your shirt. You know what I mean? It's you connect the emotion of this person, and you're never gonna know who it is. It's kind of weird, but beautiful. So I love the idea, and I asked him if I could do it, and I've done it in different places around the world, just from time to time. But it's a little bit of a passion project. And I've done it here in Pablo now recently.
Yeah, no, I've seen it.
People need it and love it because they'll read the story, and not everyone writes. You have the permission to write your own one and take the piece of paper away, and you put it in the box. I don't know who you are, what it is. And the things that people write, it's amazing. But what helps, again, a bit like the AA, when you're in those meetings and you're sharing or you're listening, someone will be saying something on those little mini stories that you need to express or you need to hear. And the ones that would cry the most, specifically on a day I did on the beach recently, was the psychiatrist. And they came up to me and they'd say, do you know how much this is needed? I'm like, yeah, I believe it. And I don't even know why I'm doing it. I just like doing it because I want to connect to people. But that is the project. That's what I got from him, the Strangers Project in New York. He's quite well known on Instagram. And then I brought it into the course. I brought it into the course because we're all sitting there on the beginning of the coaching course, which I've got is like maybe about 20 or 30 of us sometimes. We do a call every week. Now it's self-study. But I came up with the idea of getting people to do that as well, but without saying their name. And I would probably know because I'd see the email and I'd put it in the course and people still don't know who it is, but it adds another layer of connection and knowing all these people on the course because we do many exercises, but that was a beautiful one that I think people really liked and really liked reading the other stories of other people and hopefully express something that they maybe wouldn't normally.
Yes, and when you're anonymous, you can write anything you want. We all knew each other quite well as a group, but I didn't know who a lot of the stories were on that course, and they were, we just used to email Greg just to let you know a story that we wanted to tell, but not necessarily to Greg or to the group, but just wanted to talk about to get something off of our chest. And then it would be put in, but anonymously. And it is a beautiful feeling writing when nobody knows who you are. I mean, it's very different for me because, I wrote my book, The Natural Wellness Journal, and the first chapter, which is only 6 pages, I condensed it down very much, is kind of my story to how I got here. But I was very aware when I wrote it that I had to be respectful of people in my life when I wrote my story. I remember having this great advice on the Hay House Writers course when somebody asked the question, and it's quite a famous quote, and they said, what if you want to write badly about somebody? The quote is, if people want you to write nicely about them, they should have treated you better.
Yeah, why not?
And it's like, but I wanted to be very respectful. I didn't talk about the fact that my marriage had just fallen to pieces when I wrote the book because most people didn't know yet. So, I kept things quiet, but it's so lovely just to write and get things off your chest. And you used to do this a lot in the course. And I think this is a really good exercise for anybody that's feeling a bit crap in their life at the moment. And there's a lot of people out there that are suffering. We've had a pretty hard 3 years. And Greg used to do this exercise where you would just ask us questions. And this was all on Zoom. And he'd just ask us questions and we would write the answers. And it was basically to get our creative juices going to be able to write meditations. So can you remember? Can you give us
Yeah.
any of those questions?
Totally. So basically, questions specifically, no. But what I would do, and what I've realized over the last few years, I'm pretty good at understanding people a little bit, or feeling their emotion or the energy. Not necessarily like I know that person or whatever, but just getting an idea of how they feel. So you have all these people on Zoom, same as a workshop, where it's not the same, but the similar principle. And I could actually spot sometimes who was feeling a bit sad, who was feeling a bit high. But we go through those questions before you either write a meditation or remember it was the speaking of the meditation. Because I used to do acting classes mainly and a few small things, but I enjoyed the classes because we'd always, as a group, we'd all dive in together and we'd help each other a lot. And you have to go to the emotion in acting. I know you've done some in the past as well. You have to go to the emotion, or it's just people aren't going to believe you. That's why I do believe there's quite a big similarity with the acting and the sessions or the breath work that I like to do, because I go to the emotion as much as possible. But just go back to those questions, was the idea was to get people thinking in a different way. Well, one of the things that we did, if you remember, was, okay, for example, so when people are reading a meditation or a story or whatever it may be, let's use the meditation. It can be often, because people aren't used to doing it, reasonably bland, let's say. Not always, but I've noticed it. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Now, without realizing, I haven't always got it right, but I'm coming from the performance background, I would add more into it quite naturally. So then one of the exercises we did in an acting class a long time ago was you have this little monologue, and you say, Greg, you need to prepare your monologue for tomorrow. And it's a small little page. You go, okay. So you have the monologue ready, and you can't help but just read it as you're acting. I'm this character, I'm this thing, blah, blah, blah. And she'd get us to do this in front of the camera. And as we were doing it, halfway through, she would stop. And then she would ask us to tell us a story, a real story from our life, if you remember that one. So it would be something that happened to you, because people would start reading. I would start reading my my little thing in the acting class, and it'd be like I'd be acting. I couldn't help it. Now and then, as soon as she asked me to tell a real story from my life, I thought about this moment when I was traveling around Spain on the motorbike and I ran out of petrol. The body language changed, and I go like this, and I'm and of course, because I can see it and feel it, because it's real. Now, if you're reading a script or a meditation, you're going to go through the emotions, but are you going to make it real? So I would do that. And one of the best ones I remember was with Declan. I don't know if you're on the call, but it was beautiful because he was doing his thing and he's performing a little bit, but I know Declan, and I know he's very emotional. He's a very caring person. So right in the middle, I would stop him, and then I asked him a few questions. Sorry, yeah, it was a mixture between the little monologue or me asking the person questions that I knew would get to the emotion. And we have to do that. You have to have quite an open class, and they have to trust you. So that's why I would always do energy exercises at the beginning, moving around, telling jokes. But with Declan, I remember he was going through the motions, doing it well, nothing wrong with it, but he was just performing a little bit. And that's not the emotion. So then I asked him a few questions and this, that, and the other about certain things. And I knew him a little bit, so I could do that. And then before you knew it, everyone is listening to every single word he's saying because he's being real. And as soon as he got to that point where he was being emotional, real about himself, I said, right, boom, now go back and read the meditation again right now. Just go with it. And he'd do it and he'd read it. And it was totally different. We did this many times with people, because if we were to do it now, for example, or wherever, you would dive into your own little world, especially in those classes, and you'd be real, you'd tell your story. And if someone like me would inject with emotional questions, like normally in normal life, maybe people would think you're being rude, but because you create that atmosphere, I would go in at certain points and go, but what was this and how was that? And what did your dad think? What did your mum think? Why did you do this? Hopefully in an empathetic way, so people trusted me and I trusted them. And it would change it dramatically. And then I go, right now, go back to that meditation or the acting class, go back to your monologue. And the monologue will be completely different because I did it myself. All the things I did in the class is what I've done myself in the past. And exactly the same on the call. Now, it's difficult to keep that motion forever, but that to me is the key. Otherwise, you can't just press play and be in a class in front of people. Whereas I get it, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm of the other side where whatever I'm feeling or I want to feel or I can feel from the other people, I'm going to put it in there and out there because it is all energetic. And I didn't realize this years ago. It's all energetic.
It's all energy.
Yeah. So those little things make a huge difference for the person who is learning how to write or how to, whether you like it or not, there's a performance in there. There's only a small amount, whether you're doing a yoga class or something else. Get them to go into that state. And it's really important, but it comes from all the little things I've done in my life and all the things that I've seen other people do, because you don't wake up one morning and go, oh my God, I've got it all. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And you've got to dig into what what's come from you. And it was a life coach I got after I went to a Tony Robbins seminar about 6 years or 5 years ago. And he was like, well, don't you realize what you've got over the past 4 or 5 years from stopping drinking and doing several things that can help people? Everyone's got something they've gone through, they've been through. If they're honest and if they're emotional themselves to a point, obviously without having the self-pity, but being real, then you can help other people with that. It doesn't mean their story is the same. It doesn't mean you're the same. But if you're opening up yourself and then you bring them in and they open up, they're going to discover something about themselves, and they're going to be a better coach, a better healer, a better therapist, whatever it may be.
I don't like that. I don't like that word healer. I'm going to pick you up on it because none of us are healers. What we are facilitators to teach people how to heal themselves. It's that simple. But that is, what a lot of us are trying to do. I mean, my life has completely turned upside down in the last 2 years. And it's only, 2 years ago, honestly, Greg, I didn't know how to use social media, did I? I couldn't use any tech. I couldn't even get on a fucking on a Zoom. I was just I just pushed myself past the comfort zone because so many people need help out there now. And I was very much of the belief that, this wasn't going to happen on my watch, everything that happened in the world. And there's no money in healthy people, and they don't want us to be healthy. And so this is really down to us guys to sort this out, because they're really not going to tell you all the amazing things that you can do for your health. And I think, just on that note, most of the people that I've admired and I've learned from have all got these stories. We've all got these stories. Greg's got it. I've got it. Niraj from Soma's got it. The most famous one is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who had a hell of a time. But people don't go into this normally. My mentor for EFT and Matrix Reimprint, she talks very honestly about the fact that how many times she tried to commit suicide, and she even failed at that because she just believed, she just said, I'm a failure. And so, we go on these journeys, and it takes us to where we are now, trying to help whoever we can. And so if anybody is out there today and they feel their life is completely shit, know that you follow a lot of good people who have transformed them. Go and look at Joe Dispenza, go and look at there's a wonderful woman. I have her book, The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies, and she was in a wheelchair with MS, and they were just kind of saying, well, you're just going to die. And she went, no, I'm not. And she went and wrote this phenomenal book, which has been a Bible to me. And I share a lot of her work. Nicole Appletain, I can't remember. So then take us forward to how I met you and the breath work, and explain how the breath work combined with the music and the dancing and the movement and the intention, setting the intention, how that is completely different to just meditations. Because so many people, will put on a meditation album and it's somebody talking in a very soft, gentle voice, and it's, I'm going to be honest, it's boring as fuck. There's a lot of them out there. I hope people don't say that about mine.
But it doesn't matter, because the beauty of it is it's different strokes for different folks. But yeah, on that with the breath again, for me, so I'm pretty I'm not always like this, but I'm quite active and I'm always moving around, and I enjoyed quickly going into transcendental meditation. Really helped me because it quietens the mind. I did it for about a year non-stop. I've tailed off a bit recently, but I like it. Then someone introduced me to Wim Hof.
Can you just explain what that is?
Transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
In my simple layman's terms, what I know as is simply a mantra that you repeat very slowly in your mind for roughly 15 to 20 minutes, once or twice a day. They say the mantra is specific for you, but it isn't. But I do respect what they do, and I'm glad I did the course, which is basic, but teach me how to do it with other people. So you're simply repeating a mantra very slowly, which they give you. There are some slight variants between them. and you just sit there in silence. And first of all, the mind is going bing, bong, 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 bing. But the idea, one of the metaphors they give is like the ocean. The top of the ocean is always moving and like this and going around. And the idea is to transcend down to a point with the bottom of the ocean, for example, where it's still, calm, and quiet. And this amazed me by giving me so much more energy and less reactionary. So I think it's one of the most powerful ones for me.
We are running out of time. And I just, before we go, I have to talk to you about my favorite meditation of yours, which is up on YouTube. And tell us why you wrote it and what it's called.
Okay, your favorite meditation, and actually my most popular meditation on YouTube, I don't have 1 million followers, but enough, is the Fuck It meditation. Now it's 15 minutes. It's not just a meditation, it's breathing, but it's not like long breathing and long breath holds. It's short, it's sweet, it's rapid, then slow, then holding your breath out, holding your breath in. But in the mix of all this, a couple of minutes to warm you up with like, what are those things that are bothering you? What do you need to let go of? Just tell it to fuck it and let that shit go and stuff like that. It's because someone mentioned one day about a guy that couldn't get into meditation. He needs something different. And literally within 10 minutes, I just wrote that in my mind, wrote it down. I had the music already and just recorded it straight away because I felt it directly, because there's so many meditations that are about love, light, liberty, and all this. And they're great. But loads of people want to be able to just fuck off. Fucking hell, release the shit. And it's rapid breathing. Me in the background, like I've given it to people who know me and they said they couldn't do it because they're laughing. Because I'm just like, let it go, release the shit, but with some serious stuff in there. But hopefully by the end of 15 minutes, you will have released a bit of shit. You have the freedom to be able to kind of say, fuck it and let it go. People really like it. And yeah, it was your favorite one straight away. Fits you like a glove.
Yeah, I remember surely not in one of the lockdowns when I had my daughter and her friends over. It must have been between lockdowns. But I can remember calling you and going, my daughter's here with a load of friends and they were kind of like 16, 17. I said, have you got a really good meditation with swear words in? Because none of them want to meditate and do breath work with me. And you went, yeah, I've just recorded one. And you sent it to me. And I had them all doing fuck it. And we had fun. And even if they didn't meditate, we had a lot of fun and we laughed. Yeah. And that is also important.
Totally.
So where can people find you?
People can find me at infinitebreathworks.com. They can become a breath coach. The unique breath coach is one of my courses on there. There will be more courses coming soon. Infinite Breath on YouTube. Infinite Breath / Infinite Stories, because now I do the stories on Instagram. Yeah, that's about it.
Oh, it has been such a joy to talk to you, my friend. Greg Mannion. Oh, and I will actually just say before I go that next week, in celebration of this episode, I'm actually going to put out one of my meditations from my album. So this week you're going to have a laugh, and then next week I'm going to be a bit serious.
That's good. I mentioned as well, Paul made the music. No, is that correct?
Yeah, no, I mentioned Paul Mannion at the beginning. I did mention Paul, and we'll put him in the show notes. He wrote the completely fantastic music for my album. It has been an absolute joy knowing the Mannion brothers. We've had a gas. So anyway, guys, go and find Greg Mannion and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining me here on The Wellness Way. Goodbye. If you would like to see more of this interview, please head over to my Rumble channel and join my locals community. We have never experienced such unbelievable censorship in the natural health community, and Rumble is one of the very few places left to speak freely about what has happened to our health over the last few years and debate if Western medicine has been hijacked. I will never ask any of my guests to be censored, so I will be putting the full uncut video versions of all podcasts up for free. All you have to do is create an account if you haven't done so already. The link is in the show notes, and I would highly recommend that you come and join me. And you can sign up to my webpage for my newsletters and details of all my work, including my Telegram channel, which is also uncensored if you would like to learn even more. Thank you.